that night at dinner, I said to my coworkers, I said, I agree more with the advisors than I agree with you guys. I think that, you're too nitpicky, and the compliance stuff that you guys care about has nothing to do with the quality of advice these people are giving. And one of the ladies at dinner said, well, then you should go become a financial advisor. 20 years later, here I am. So I guess I have her to thank for that. So the book is written in 5 sections. Before I dive into it, I want to say I was very reluctant to write this book because I didn't want it to come across as we've got it all figured out. Okay, we don't. We're still trying to figure it out. But one thing I will say is I've spent the last 20 years really proactively figuring out how other firms that are successful do certain things. I told someone earlier today, I've essentially spent my whole career just stealing good ideas from other people and then implementing them. And so my goal in writing this is to save, especially the younger folks in the room, the pain and the time, right, of learning some lessons that I had to learn the hard way. So Ryan convinced me that I should write the book for 3 reasons. Number one, I've had great mentors. I started at a firm, Lincoln Financial, where that was a big part of the culture. But if you're at a small RIA and if you're independent, you may not have access to a lot of great mentors. So I wanted to help them with that. Number two, I have my own, associate advisors, and I'd like them to have a consistent thought on how to do things. So this is my way to document everything, right? How to think about client meetings, how to think about your weekly schedule, and I'll get into all that. Number three, to find my tribe. I think that a small percentage of people in this industry want to do a great job, okay? And so for those folks that are like-minded, if you read what I wrote and you go, hey, I agree with a lot of that and I'm trying to get there too, let's connect. Okay, that was, the third reason that I wrote it. I'm gonna go fast, but I'm also gonna ask me questions along the way if you want. I will be here the rest of the day, so feel free to ask me questions afterwards. And one favor I will ask, take notes, or at least pretend to. That'll make me think I've said something important. So with this slide, I want to just start by saying the word of the day for me is really philosophy, okay? And I want you to just think differently about what is your role as a financial advisor. So my big philosophy is that if I have deeper conversations with my clients, it will lead to deeper relationships, and that will lead to more referrals. As Ryan said, nearly all of our growth, absent, I've done a couple small purchase acquisitions, and we can certainly talk about the pros and cons of that as well, have come through new money from existing clients and referrals. And I think it all is because I've positioned myself in a way to be proactive instead of reactive, which is unfortunately the bane of most financial advisors. So section 1, I want you to take a step back and say, what is it that you are striving to become? I think that your goal should be to become the type of financial advisor that you would want to hire if you were looking for an advisor. Or the type of advisor that if something happened to me, I know that my wife could go to someone and they're gonna take great care of my wife and my kids, okay? Now, how do you do that? Number one, you have to develop technical expertise. There's no way around it. And for those of you that are pursuing the CFP, that is a great start, okay? CFP is a great start. In fact, I would not hire a young advisor at this point that was not going through the CFP program. Now, it's not enough, right? It's the beginning. There's actually a section in the book called Great Books for Great Advisors. And even that, I would tell you, is kind of the next level. And if you get through all those and you still want more, email me, because I purposely didn't include all of the books I think you should read in there, because I didn't want it to be too overwhelming, okay? But especially when you're young, the highest ROI activity that you can do is to sharpen the saw, okay? So develop technical expertise. Number 2, adopt a discovery mindset. And what I mean by that is, if you are genuinely interested in the person that you're sitting across, you're gonna ask great questions, hopefully they're gonna open up to you, and you're gonna develop those deeper conversations and deeper relationships. So I put there Charlie Rose over CNBC. You could learn more by going back and watching old episodes of Charlie Rose and how he interviews people than you will ever learn by watching CNBC, okay? Because that's what this profession is about. It's not about Exxon today and Chevron tomorrow. It's about connecting with the person sitting across from you. I have developed, a lot of which I've stolen, 2 questionnaires that I use that are at the beginning of the process with clients. The first one is your standard 1 page of, actually 2 pages of qualitative and then 1 page of quantitative. And my questions start with basic stuff. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What did you major in? Why did you pick that major? And then I go into, for all of the areas in the CFP of financial planning, what is your philosophy on estate planning? What is your philosophy on charitable planning? What is your philosophy on cash planning? For most people, they have never had a conversation like that, okay? Just right there, you're already gonna differentiate yourself. If you meet someone and they own some mutual funds or they have a Fidelity account, no one's ever talked to them about this. What is your philosophy on retirement? And just starting to have those conversations, okay? Second thing, you gotta get at bats, okay? So, no offense if anyone here works at a bank, but in the long run, that's not the route I would go, but it is a great starting place. Fidelity, Vanguard, great starting place, because you're gonna get a lot of at bats. You have to get exposure, okay? I'll tell you a really quick story. I dated a girl in college whose brother was going to medical school, and in his 3rd year of medical school, he did Doctors Without Borders. And they took a boat to Africa, and for 2 days, people waited in line, and whatever ailment you had, they would help them with, okay? Everything from toothache to, right, you name it. And he said to me, I learned more in 2 days than in 3 years of medical school. Why? Exposure, right? So I was very lucky early in my career, before I was even an advisor, so right after my internal audit debacle, I was in Lincoln Financial Group Chicago office, and they would meet every week, and they would do a planning deep dive where advisors would come in with specific clients that they were working on, and the planning department would basically volley around and say, well, we could do this, or we could do that, and I used to get to sit in those meetings. What's really hard about that is when you're young, you're trying to get paid in dollars, but sometimes you get paid in experience, okay? And so I would encourage you, try to get in meetings, even if you're not gonna get paid to be in them, because a lot of good can come out of getting asked a question that you don't know the answer to. Memory is tied to emotion, right? The pain of not knowing the answer will help you go out and seek that answer. Number 3, and I think this is super, super important, right? So likability plus dependability equals referability. I can't help you be more likable, but if you ask people a lot of questions about themselves, you're off to a good start, right? Think about a date, okay? Dependability, why do we hate salespeople? Because they make empty promises. So a very simple thing, right? I tell a client or a prospective client, I'm gonna call you tomorrow at 10 a.m. I better call you tomorrow at 10 a.m., right? Or I'm off to a bad start. But it goes so much further than that. What about when you're meeting with a prospective client and you say, hey, if you hire us, every year we're gonna run a tax projection and we're gonna decide if you should do anything different between November and January, or if you should do a Roth conversion. Well, you better have a system in place to make good on that promise. If you don't, right, you might not get fired, but you're not gonna get referrals, okay? So write that down. Likability plus dependability equals referability. I'm gonna give a really quick example. My firm uses an outsourced IT firm, okay? We pay them an arm and a leg to make sure that the computers work when we come in, and there's no viruses, blah, blah, blah. All right, the owner is one of my clients. When I met him in 2009, they were doing 1.3 million of revenue. Last year, they did 1.3 million of revenue. That's terrible, right? They are good enough to not get fired. They're not good enough to get referrals. And they have gone through all sorts of consultants and whatnot to figure out how we can grow. And the reality is they're just good enough, right, to stay as our firm. And I'm sure we don't feel that, we're not the ones who feel that way, but they're not good enough to get referrals. So that's what I want you to think about there. Okay, so you've gotten in front of some people, now you're gonna start to build a loyal client base. There's 3 things that you need to do. First, you have to be able to get in front of potential clients. Here's my 2 cents on marketing. I'll tell you 3 things that you should know. First, do what you love. If you like the form of marketing that you're doing, you'll stick with it. If you don't like it, you'll stop doing it because it's really hard. I've done every form of marketing under the sun. I've done seminars, I've done webinars, I've done client events, I've done advisory boards. You name it, you'll say, this didn't work too well, I'm gonna stop doing it. But if you enjoy it, some people enjoy writing, some people enjoy speaking, you're way more likely to stick with it. Number two, if you're younger, I would really encourage you to develop a niche. So, Cozy was the lady who spoke this morning about the FAFSA. You know what, if I were young and I was starting, I would really learn that stuff that she talked about. Because if you could sit down with a family who's trying to figure that out, and you could help them figure that out, how much more referable are you when they're talking to their kids' friends' parents, right? Or their friends who have kids of the same age. Because you help them solve a really particular problem that they're dealing with, okay? And the thing is, when you're younger, it's harder to become a technical expert on, let's say, estate planning or tax planning, because that stuff takes, or investments, because that stuff takes years. But you could probably become an expert on the FAFSA stuff that she was talking about. You sit in enough meetings with her and prospective clients, you're going to start to pick it up, right? For me, of all the forms of marketing, if I were to go through my list of clients and say, where did I get these folks? The overwhelming majority is from referrals, okay? So my entire marketing plan has been built around referrals, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. All right, second, get in front of potential clients. That's your marketing plan. You got to be persuasive once you get in front of them. Technical expertise plus genuine interest equals a high closing ratio, okay? You could be really concerned about them, but when they ask you a question about, well, here's my issue, I'm on my second marriage and my kids are only slightly younger than my second wife, and I'm concerned that, if I die first, that my kids are gonna hate my new wife because they're waiting on their inheritance. If you don't know how to have that conversation about potential planning techniques that would solve that problem, right, you're not as likely to get hired, okay? That's where the technical expertise plus the genuine interest. Now, I talk about a high closing ratio, but what I don't have on here is that we have a low acceptance ratio, meaning out of every 5 people that I sit down with, really only probably 1 is someone we want to take on as a client. So remember, this is called building a loyal client base. And the reason is because one of the most important things that you can do is avoid taking on the wrong clients, okay? And any advisor you talk to that's been doing this for 20 years knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, a few tips to avoid taking on the wrong clients. Have a target audience. Think about what challenges do they have, what's their schedule like, what are their resources like, and do they align with your own? So for example, most of my clients are retired, they sold a business, or they're wealthy real estate investors, often multi-generational planning. That means, well, first of all, I'm good at multi-generational planning, I enjoy it. They can meet with me during the day. They're used to paying for expertise. They have CPAs, they have attorneys, right? They have mortgage brokers, they have commercial real estate people in their lives. They have a lot of financial decisions to make, and there's a lot of dollars involved, okay? These things are all lining with, okay, yeah, I wanna work with these people. And their planning needs align with my planning interests. I don't do stock option or RSU planning. I learned it, I passed the CFP, I've had some clients with that. It's just not my thing. And I've found a lot of executives want to meet, on Friday at 5 o'clock when they're done working. They want to meet on Saturdays, or they want me to go to their house. I don't want to do any of those things. You may, and that's okay, right? But this goes back to aligning what I want to do and when I want to do it with who I'm trying to work with. I have 3 criteria for taking on a client, and I tell people this during my prospective client meetings. Number 1, I have to like them. All my clients have my cell phone. One of my biggest clients called me 20 minutes ago. I was sitting in the back and I stepped out to call him back. Number 2, I have to genuinely be able to help them. That means one of 2 things. It means the thing that they need, I'm really good at, but it could also mean if I meet with a young couple, they both have W-2 income, their only form of savings is their 401k, I can't create that much value for that person. And which leads to number 3, I have to get paid for my work, right? We all have to get paid for our work. And if the amount of value you're creating is perfectly equal to what they're paying you, you'll probably be good enough to not get fired, but you're not gonna get much referrals. I have to be able to create more value, right, than what they're paying. That's how you get raving fans as clients. So So those are my 3 criteria. The biggest mistake that you can make, especially when you're younger, and again, you know, there's this rub, because when you're young, you have to make a certain amount of revenue, because you gotta eat, is taking on the person who says, I wanna hire you to manage an account, we'll see how it goes, and then maybe, right, that will develop. I mean, at this stage in your career, there's a 0 chance I'm taking that person on some line, right? We don't do that. First of all, we don't manage accounts, right? We work with families. Second of all, and I tell people this, I'm not suggesting that you hire me to be your money manager. I'm suggesting you hire me to have someone like me in your life, right? Marty Kurtz is a legend in this industry. One of his quotes is, everyone needs someone that they can talk to about money. Okay, so there's a proverb, if you wanna go fast, go alone. If you wanna go far, go together. I know some great advisors that have 0 staff, or they have 1 staff person. That's not the model for me. They've grown, but at some point their growth is stalled, right? And there's just there's only so many hours in the day. So for me, growth has meant building and maintaining a professional staff, okay? So, I love Nick Saban. You may think what you want of him. I went to a college that didn't have a very good football program, so I root for Alabama, I'm not afraid to admit that. And one of my favorite Nick Saban quotes, mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. My number 1 rule for building the staff is no C players. And here's the reason why. Okay, no matter how nice they are, A players are afraid to delegate to them. So if I have a C player on the team, and I'm paying an A player, you know, so let's say I want to make $1,000 an hour, and I'm paying my A players $75 to $100 an hour, and I delegate to them, and I delegate 6 tasks, but some component of that task, they need to go delegate to someone beneath them, and that person's $15 or $20 an hour, but they won't do it if it's a C player because they know it won't get done. And ultimately, I'm gonna come back to them and say, hey, I asked you to do these 6 things. So now I've got a $75 or $100 an hour person doing $15 or $20 an hour work, okay? Which then is gonna bring me back into the fold, right? When the whole point was to delegate that. And if you get this right, if I'm delegating effectively, that frees up my time to do $1,000 an hour work. So no C players, no matter how nice they are, okay? Number 2, what's the difference between an A player and a B player? A B player does every single thing you ask them to do. They might do it right the first time, but they're not proactive. They're not problem solving. They're not figuring out, how do I make this even easier the next time, okay? And so I tell my team all the time, if we don't get proactive, then the only way to grow is by hiring more people. And if we hire more people, then there's gonna be a natural cap on the pay raises of the existing people. So if everyone wants to make more, the growth should not come just through hiring. The growth needs to come through the fact that we are proactively figuring out a way to be more efficient all the time, okay? Now, the other thing is, and this is especially true for younger folks, not all currency comes in wages. So I've just listed a few on there. There's wages, there's upside, right? So upside is, I may have a certain base, but I want the ability to make even more if the firm does well. PTO, I mean, for a lot of the younger folks I work with who have young kids at home, more PTO is actually more valuable to them than me giving them another pay raise, okay? Responsibility and recognition, so we're gonna talk a little bit about personality profiles, but for certain folks, being recognized in front of the group is as important and as valuable, getting the promotion, the new title, as getting more money, okay? And last but not least, equity, and I don't mean like the new version of equity, I mean like you own a percentage of the company equity, okay? So, everyone on my team has done a DISC profile. If you've never heard of it, I would suggest you do it. There's 4 main, you know, dominator, influencer, steadiness, and conscientiousness. I have purposely built my team where there are 2 Ds and everyone else is a C or an S, which is really a way of saying there's 2 rainmakers and then there's a bunch of people that catch the rain. Now, the good news is they are very conscientious and they're very steady, but you also have to realize that those folks aren't necessarily gonna be the most creative, the most entrepreneurial, right? So you do have to help them with the proactive, how to solve this problem, you know, more efficiently the next time. Same concept, new slide, is if you want to build and maintain a professional staff, there's 3 things you have to get right. So culture, I gave a presentation like this 8 years ago, and we were a lot smaller then, and I said, one of my goals is for everyone on my team, and I'm in the staff, to make at least 6 figures. And I had some head scratchers in the audience, and a few people were like, why is that? I mean, that seems like a weird goal. And I'm like, no, it's not a weird goal, because I want really good people on the team, and it doesn't bother me to pay them well, because it means that we're doing well and we're growing, okay? So part of our culture is we talk about what our mission statement is and who we are best designed to serve at our annual planning meeting and at all of our quarterly meetings. And again, your culture is everything that you do. It's not what you say, it's what you do, okay? It's really important when you're an advisory firm to hire people that are cultural fit. And sometimes what happens is you go, oh, this person, they've got a bunch of clients, they've got a bunch of AUM, they've got a bunch of revenue, we should add them to our team. If that person is not a cultural fit, that is going to be a huge disaster, okay? Hire slow, fire quick. So I have hired 2 people in the last 6 months. Both of them commented on, I cannot believe how long and thorough and painful the hiring process was. And I don't mean in terms of bureaucracy. I mean multiple rounds of interviews, multiple personality tests, references, the whole 9. Hire slow, fire quick. Because once they're on board, right, we're going to compensate them well, we're going to take great care of them. So let's talk a little bit about compensation. I was in management at Lincoln, and we were in a meeting, and HR said, the compensation philosophy of Lincoln is to figure out what the median comp is for a job and pay that, okay? I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So you're gonna get a bunch of B-, C+ players. I mean, who wants to make the median compensation for a job? I tell my guys all the time, I'd rather have 6 A players than 12 B and C players, okay? You can make twice as much. Yeah, you might have to work twice as hard, or you could just figure out a way to be more efficient. It's way harder to manage 12 B and C players than 6 A players, even if it costs you the same. Our comp package is salary, health insurance, 401k, profit sharing, pension plan. The way to think about all of that is compensation for my staff is targeted at 20% of our revenue, okay? It's targeted at 20% of our revenue. And then within that, 3/4 is fixed and 1/4 is variable. So first of all, that allows me some buffer for when you have a bad year like last year and the market goes down, right? Where what you don't want to have happen is I have these high fixed costs against variable revenue. Second of all, if I set a target, then I know I can build my current org chart, which I've always done for the last decade, and my future org chart. And I can, okay, as we grow, right, 20% of a bigger number is a bigger number, who am I hiring next? And it starts with the role. What role am I hiring next? And then what would that personality type look like? Does that hopefully make sense? We give a lot of PTO days. We're closed a lot of days. I mean, let's be honest, no client should be calling you on the 3rd of July or the 5th of July or the 23rd of December, right? So there's a bunch of days we're closed that don't even count as PTO days. And the funny thing is, if you hire rock stars, no one on my team uses all of their PTO days. And they've also started to figure out the cadence. They know that the week of Thanksgiving is slow, and the 2 weeks around Christmas are slow, and right, most of July is slow. So they're not taking their vacations right during tax season. Carrie, that's a quote in the book from Dr. Laura. She says, choose wisely, treat kindly. So it's hard to get on the team, but once you're on the team, try to take great care of them. That means recognizing your teams, their staff anniversaries, their birthdays. My wife will actually remember like my employees' kids' birthdays and send them stuff. I mean, it's amazing what little things will do. The last thing I'm gonna say really quickly about comp, I'll tell you another story. Ryan and I used to work with a guy named Aaron Jung in Northern California. One of the advisors that Aaron was an advisor, he shared a staff person's other advisor. And he said, we leased their admin a Mercedes. And it was like $500 a month. And their admin thought it was the greatest thing in the world because, all of his friends were so impressed that he was driving a Mercedes. Well, if you think about it, it was $500 a month that 2 advisors were split. It's not that much money. If he had said, I'm gonna give you a $6,000 a year pay raise, it would have been important, but it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, right? But because it was this symbolic thing where they went out and they leased him this car, it was like the biggest deal to him. And they didn't invent this. Hanson McLean, which is a huge firm, which is now Allworth, did this for years. If you got to a certain point, they'd go out and lease you a car. So just think a little bit creatively when it comes to how to compensate people. All right, with great staff, you can be worth $1,000 an hour. It starts with, you have to know your client's financial situation inside and out. I am always amazed when another advisor will come to me with a question, and I'll say, well, let's talk about their client file. Do you have their tax returns on file? No, why would I have those? Do you have a copy of their estate plan? Well, I only needed the certificate of trust to set up the brokerage account in the name of the trust. Okay, you should have a file on your client that has everything, right? And you guys, again, you're going through the CFP program, all of you guys are learning this stuff. And if you have a client that says, well, my last advisor, they never asked me for that stuff, great. That's an opportunity to coach them on how what you're gonna do is gonna be more comprehensive than what the last person did. And I've gotten that many times. Why do you need that? My last advisor didn't ask for that. So you should know their goals inside and out. You should review their tax returns with them. You should diagram and review their estate plan with them. And if they don't have one, not only should you help them get it, but you should literally sit in the meeting with them, the estate planning attorney. You should keep their finances updated, and most importantly, you should ask them about things like their health, right? Because none of this really matters if they don't make it. I just had one of my favorite clients passed away about a month ago. She had all the money in the world, but she wasn't doing enough proactive stuff to, take care of her health, and what good did it do? So I had an advisor, his name's Chris, and he used to work for me, and he told me one time, my problem is I don't know how to steer the conversation beyond investments. Every one of my clients sees me as their investment guy, and I don't know how to broaden the conversation. And I said, okay, so what does your agenda look like? And he said, well, I don't use an agenda with clients. Okay, well, there's a problem. I said, well, what materials do you bring to the meetings? And he said, I bring a copy of their most recent statement, their investment account statement, and a Morningstar report. What else are they gonna see you as, right? So if you wanna have these deeper conversations, you should have an agenda that has more than just investments on it. Because the problem with having just investments on there, well, first of all, they're only gonna see you as an investments guy. But second of all, it's so much harder to get referrals as just the investment guy. Because you can only get referred based on one thing, performance, right? And anyone who's been managing money for a while knows how hard it is to get referred based solely on performance. If you're doing, again, what Cozy was teaching as far as helping them solve, the problems for their kids' college, or I think you guys have all met Connor. I've had Connor Kavanaugh meet with 7 of my clients who have a kid with special needs. That stuff, it makes you so much more referable. It's so much easier for someone to say, you should talk to Rob because he helped me solve this problem, than it is to say, you should talk to Rob and let him manage all your money, because people don't really wanna put someone else in that position, right? There's too much risk for them as the referrer. Okay, stay current, right? You gotta read Financial Advisor Magazine, Kiplinger Tax Newsletter. You gotta attend conferences like this and hopefully take notes and get something out of it. I read a lot more than what I put on here. And again, when you're reading it, you should be taking notes of like, okay, who is the person that this might actually help? So again, sorry, Cozy, you said some good stuff today. She said, if you have clients who have a kid who's a sophomore or junior in college. So if you got one thing out of that, it should be, who are my clients that have a kid who's a sophomore or junior in college? And if you don't know that probably goes back to number 1, right? You should know your client's financial situation and how old their kids are, right? And all those things. Guard your time. So you guys are all too young, but there used to be a show called Seinfeld, which was amazing and hilarious, okay? And they asked Jerry Seinfeld, what made your show so great? And he said, Larry David and I spent 90% of our time working on the show and trying to make it funny. Now, I don't know anything about television. Is that normal? He said no. He said most writers spend 30% of their time working on the show and 70% of their time working on everything else, okay? Well, this is the same for you. If you're spending 90% of your time trying to figure out how to add more value to your clients' lives, okay, you will be successful. Half of them were spending half of their time doing God knows what, and then asking me why I don't get more referrals. Last but not least, probably the most important thing.
Rob, when you get a referrals that don't meet your ideal client profile, what do you say to them?
So first of all, I tell every client, I'm happy to meet with someone that you think I can help, right? So the number one question you get is, hey, I want to refer you to my sister, what's your minimum? I absolutely hate that question. Hate it, I've hated it my whole career. I think that your minimum should vary depending on the age of the person. Why would my minimum for a 35-year-old who's still making a bunch of money and saving a bunch of money be the same as my minimum for a 75-year-old who needs a miracle to avoid running out of money? So I hate that question, right? So I always say, if there's someone that you, in your life that you care about that you think I can help, I'm happy to spend some time talking to them and seeing if I can help, okay? And remember, we get a lot of referrals, and 4 out of 5 I'm not taking on. You have to learn the art of explaining to the person that you're sitting in front of that they're better off not hiring you, and mean it in a way that they go back to the referrer and say, wow, I really enjoyed my time with Rob. He told me that there's a couple things I need to do, but I don't need to hire him at this point, right? So it's not I'm rejecting you, it's given what I charge for what we do, I can't create enough value in your life for me as a fiduciary to honestly recommend you hire me right now. You don't need what we do. You need to do these 3 things, okay?
But the question, do you ever refer out to other advisors?
All the time, yeah, all the time. And my typical clients are probably different than a lot of folks. So yeah, I know a bunch of advisors that are in different phases of their career. And like on the RSU and option ones, I mean, I have a particular advisor that I refer every prospective client who the crux of their concerns is RSUs and options. I refer to that guy and I say, if I was a corporate executive and I had a bunch of RSUs and options, he's the guy I would hire. Some days you're your client's money manager, some days you're the behavioral, finance person, but all days you need to be the chief problem solver, okay? And what this means is that you need to have a network of experts that you've built relationships with solely for the benefit of your clients. The problem with networking is you think, I'm gonna go meet this mortgage broker or this reverse mortgage specialist or this college age person, and I'm gonna develop a relationship with them so that they can refer clients to me. That is not the reason to network. You network so that when your client has a problem, you go, I know exactly who we're gonna bring in. You become their chief problem solver, right? I'm gonna give one quick one. One of my folks in my network is a criminal defense attorney. Now I assure you, I'm not trying to get clients for him, okay? I had a client called me in a panic. He has a high-end Porsche, his 16-year-old son was driving 110 miles an hour, got pulled over, and at that speed, they weren't gonna give him a speeding ticket. They were gonna charge him with like reckless driving or reckless endangerment, something crazy. And so the client, why he called me, but mostly because he knows I have this massive network, right? And I said, oh yeah, I have a criminal defense attorney. And I connected him and the attorney figured it out and he got a speeding ticket. So that guy, Mike, is the CFO of a company. He's telling that story at night to his friends, Eric and Ann. Eric and Ann, then they're like, well, we want to meet Rob. So then they hire me. So then Eric tells his sister, Martha. Martha's in New York, she hires me. Martha's one of my biggest clients. I've only met her twice, all because I helped Mike. Mike wasn't even a big client because his son had this issue. So my point in this is build your network solely for the benefit of helping your clients. And if you get referrals out of it, great, but that's not the reason you're building your network, okay? All right, if there's one slide in this whole thing that you're gonna print and tack above your computer, this is it, okay? So, first of all, referral philosophy. This is where advisors get it wrong. And Ryan and I both started at Lincoln. I think Lincoln made this mistake. Young advisors are taught that referrals are a form of compensation, or referrals are something a client owes you. No, 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 no. A client refers you not as a favor to you, but as a favor to the person that they're trying to help, okay? So your client is with their sister, brother, dad, kid, and that person says, I have a problem with X. And they say, well, then you should go talk to my guy. Rob can fix that problem for you. That's why they're referring. So you gotta turn that on its head. Your clients don't owe you referrals, okay? So that's number one, change your philosophy. Number two, every client needs a plan that they understand. And I'm not talking about a big, thick planning book. I mean, they need to know that you are their advisor, which means every meeting after the personal update starts with the plan. And for a lot of our clients, their plan has been boiled down to a one-pager that we start every meeting with, and it's all about cash flows. And the younger the person is, the shorter the time period. Okay, we talked about this in class last night. If you have a client who is more than 10 years from retirement, you have a 5-year cash flow plan. 30-year-olds cannot think about the next 30 years, right? They need to think about the next 5 years, what's right in front of them. But if you have someone that's retired or within 10 years of retirement, I want to have a 10-year cash flow plan. So when I say start with a plan, you're going to go through the whole planning process, right? But ultimately, every one of those review meetings, personal update, cash flow planning. Let's review the cash flow plan. Everything stems from there. Can I afford to do this thing I'm thinking about doing? It's all about cash flows, right? 1 year, and I think this is in the book, we went through a list of every client that had hired us in the last 2 years. And we wrote down their name, where they were before, right? So were they at UBS or Wells Fargo, or were they a do-it-yourselfer at Vanguard? And then why they hired us. And what we found, all of the clients that hired us came from bigger firms. None of them came from another boutique RIA. None of them were engineered do-it-yourselfers that woke up one day and decided that they needed us. They all came from a bigger firm. And the reason why, and I just had a lady that just hired me who came from Wells Fargo. And she said the same thing. My advisor's great, but he doesn't do planning. I mean, I feel bad for that guy because he should know that that's what clients want. They want planning, even though he was managing the money and doing a fine job. So you need to make it really clear, right, and reinforce in every meeting, I am your planner, and we are managing your money in accordance with the plan. Number 3, have a system to act proactively. So we take every client, we bring them on, and we say, okay, based on the size of the client and the complexity, how frequently are we gonna reach out to them? And it ranges from once a year on the very low end to 4 times a year. So some clients are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if I meet with a client, it goes into software and it tells me. So my wife actually sent me an email today, literally, that said, here's a list of people that you need to proactively reach out to, just based on the schedule that you've set, okay? And then it's my job to reach out to them. And we can get into it, we use Calendly, and I basically send them time for a check-in. Some clients don't want to meet that often, and that's okay, right? Some clients want to meet 12 times a year. Maybe that's okay. Responsiveness. I know that this is a huge thing for me. Most professionals are not as responsive as they should be. So you gotta have a system. If I get an email from a client, I flag it in red. Very simple. I flag it in red. No matter what happens that day, I know at the end of the day, or I'm traveling today at the end of the week, I will go through every email that I had in the last week that has a red flag and make sure that it's been addressed. Number 2, if you have a really good staff, right? My response can be, that's a great question. I'm copying Jennifer, I'm copying Jeff, I'm copying Kevin, right? And they'll get back to you. So I cannot tell you how often clients say, the thing I love about you is you respond to my emails, like you respond quickly, which to me seems like such table, it's like, duh. But there's a lot of good other professionals out there that it takes them, my own CPA, not the one who works for me, but my personal one being one of them, it takes him 3 weeks to respond to an email, which goes back to, he's good and he's not gonna get fired, but I've never referred anyone to him, okay? Referability, likability, dependability, likability. We use a system, it's not that, the software is not that great, but it's called SmartQ, and it allows you to create a task and physically move it throughout a process. So every time I make a promise to a client via email, I copy someone on my team, they immediately put that in their SmartQ. It's a very simple system. Once a week, I meet with everyone on my team, and I go through their SmartQ. their smart queue is essentially a collective list of all the promises that I've made. And again, if it's a planning promise, I copy in Jennifer. If it's a move money or trading promise, I copy in Jeff. If it's a service promise, I copy in Kevin, right? If it's a tax promise, I copy in Dustin. So then I'm meeting with them and it's like, oh yeah, this is all the emails I basically gotten in the last couple of weeks, and then they can show me where they're at in the process. Okay, last but not least, right, I try to spend 80% of my time in client meetings, right, or on the phone with clients or respond to their needs. 18 to 19% of my time running the business, which means meeting with my staff and doing all the things we're about to talk about, and 1 to 2% of my time doing stuff like this. Again, I've been fortunate to have really good mentors, and so now I'm at the point where I'm trying to pay it forward. And I met the past president earlier today, and she said she read the book, and her team read the book, and I said, if you ever want me to do a Zoom with your team, I'd be happy to do it. I do this type of stuff for teams all the time. So I have been involved firsthand or as a manager in every form of partnership, okay? They're talked about in the book, I won't repeat it, but there's everything from solo to ensemble, and it falls on a spectrum. We are an ensemble, okay? I will say, if you've ever heard the joke about democracy, right? The worst form of government except for all the others. An ensemble is very similar, meaning that it has its challenges, but I have found in terms of delivering real value to clients, it's the best way to do it. So that is why we are an ensemble. The things that we track, and that I would suggest that you track, total revenue and recurring revenue should be almost identically one and the same, but occasionally a client will need a term life insurance policy, or they'll need something where we're gonna get paid one time. And we can talk about how we charge planning fees, but some of our planning fees are one time. So there is a gap in those two numbers. New clients, new assets, referrals, and client meetings. I put number 1 next to client meetings. If you only knew one thing that occurred, right, like what's happened over the last quarter, how many client meetings we had, because it all stems from there. Client meetings that are well run, first of all, it's gonna keep your retention rate high because you're meeting with your existing clients. Second of all, if you're meeting with clients and you're solving their problems, it should lead to them giving you more money to manage, them giving you more referrals. Client meetings is number 1, okay? I was fortunate enough to see a few advisors that were financially very successful, but were pulling their hair out because, the business essentially took over their lives. If you've ever read the E-Myth, which you should, there's a lot in there about how to control your business so it doesn't end up controlling you. The most important thing that I do, and I stole this from Dan Sullivan, on Mondays, I don't meet with clients. I prepare for the week, and I do one-on-ones with my team. On Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, between 9 a.m. and 2, I meet with clients. And on Fridays, I don't meet with clients. I go back on all of the meetings that I had, right, and make sure that every promise made, every problem that I need to solve, I'm solving on those days. 90% of the time, I stick to that schedule. Why not 100%? Because it's not realistic, right? So you have a client who has an emergency and she can only talk to you on Monday at 11, I'm gonna talk to her on Monday at 11, right? I might talk to her on Sunday at 11. Because at the end of the day, I am there to solve my client's problems. But I do wanna have a goal on how to be proactive and how to run my schedule so that I don't end up getting burnt out. Again, when I meet with staff, we have a staff meeting, or staff meetings and team meetings. So I meet with everyone on my team once a week. My team meets once a week collectively, and then they also meet once a week without me. And the without me is all the, plumbing and the ops stuff that I don't want to deal with. I review my financials. You should review your financials every month. Ryan's giving me time, so I'm gonna go quick. I'm gonna skip that and go with this. If you are taking on new clients, you're building up your recurring revenue. Your recurring revenue will give you the confidence to hire good staff, right? Remember I said, or Ryan said, we used to be 50% first year business, 50% recurring. Well, it's really hard to hire great staff and pay them well when you have a lot of non-recurring revenue. because you're scared. What if I have this high fixed cost and the clients don't come in, and the new revenue doesn't come in? That's a terrible way to build your team. You gotta get recurring revenue to hire good staff, which will then allow you, because you delegate, to spend your time being proactive, which I wish I could tell a story, but I'm running out of time, which will allow you to get more referrals, okay? And then it becomes this virtuous cycle, because if I get more referrals, I'm gonna get more recurring revenue, I'm gonna have more staff. So we've gotten up to 11, but we didn't start at 11, right? And we just added, I just made an offer to someone, so we'll be at 12. And then I already knew who the next hire is gonna be after that, that'll be next year. And so that's the whole idea. All right, that's my email, you can email me. A bunch of templates that I've built are free, they're on the website. That's our company's website if you ever want to check it out. And like I said, if you email me, I will send you the PDF of the book, which will make it easier for you to search.
Let's give Rob a round of applause. Sorry, we don't have time to ask questions. He'll be around at lunch, so feel free to ask him questions. We're going to pause for lunch. Before we do, I'd like to recognize our students at George Fox University who are here today. They're part of the financial planning program at George Fox, so if you wouldn't mind standing up. All right, make sure you see our exhibitors for lunch. Enjoy the lunch. It should be out shortly, and thank you all for being here today.